Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Todd Bishop, and I serve as the Wildlife Bureau Chief for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. You're attending one of 20 local meetings being held across the state this week to recap the recently completed hunting and trapping season and discuss any proposed changes to hunting regulations for next year. In the room with you this evening are local wildlife biologists and conservation officers that manage wildlife habitats on public lands, provide technical assistance to private landowners, conduct wildlife surveys, and enforce hunting regulations in your area. We have a set of recorded presentations from our wildlife research biologists that provide statewide summaries on the status of wildlife populations, as well as some harvest estimates from last season. The rest of this meeting is for you to ask questions, provide comments, and participate in a group discussion regarding hunting regulations and wildlife populations. Access continues to be one of the primary concerns expressed by hunters in these meetings. Other topics include technological advances in fair chase, equitable access, sustainable harvest of the wildlife resource, and maintaining quality and healthy populations. What is sustainable use? How much hunting pressure is too much? How do technologies or methods that increase harvest success impact populations? How do these things impact the quality of the hunting experience? These are issues on both public and private land. But public lands, because of the amount of use they receive, are where we see these issues become most acute. We try to think about these things when we develop hunting regulations or regulations on use of public lands. Our public lands are relied upon by many hunters as their primary or only place to go hunting. That is why our public wildlife area regulations, with only a very few exceptions, require hunters to keep all their gear with them. Bring it in with you. It stays with you while you are there, and it goes with you when you leave. We share the land and try to leave no trace so that hunters that follow behind can enjoy the same quality hunting experience. A couple of topics that we've been discussing in these meetings the past few years include the use of trail cameras on public lands and changes related to non-resident small game hunting. We've compiled the input from last year's hunter listening meetings and followed that up with hunter surveys to better understand opinions across the hunting community, especially those who are most likely impacted by these issues. We'll be reporting back to you tonight on those results as we continue this conversation and plot a course toward future rules development. We have at least one person taking notes at your meeting to record your comments and summarize the discussion. If you'd rather submit your comments in writing, we'll collect them at the end of the meeting. We also accept comments via email, and the appropriate address is included in the recorded presentations. We'll post the recorded presentations on the DNR's website beginning next week. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your participation this evening. We value your input, and we depend on your engagement throughout the year as both hunters and conservationists to accomplish our ultimate goals of providing quality hunting opportunities and conservation of the wildlife resource, now and for future generations. Again, thank you for your participation. Have a great meeting.
Good evening. I'm Jim Coffey, Forest Wildlife Biologist for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, located out of the Sheraton Research Station. My main responsibility are two species that are very popular with Iowans, squirrels and turkeys. Our squirrels fall under our small game species survey, and we do have a good population of squirrels across most of the state. The two species we hunt are gray squirrels and fox squirrels. We're seeing a decrease in fox squirrel populations across most of the state as our timber matures. That's very reasonable as we see gray squirrels being in that timber in replacing those fox squirrels. We harvest about 120,000 squirrels a year with an average of about one squirrel per trip per hunter. It's a species that we used to have a lot of participation in and still can have. We used to harvest over 1 million squirrels in the early days of record keeping. Historically, these numbers have not changed in recent years. We average about 5 squirrels per hunter, and we average about 100,000 hunters per year. We also have 2 turkey seasons in Iowa, a fall season, which is not as popular as our spring season. In the fall, we harvest about 500 to 600 birds across about 80 counties, even though the season is open in all counties. In the spring, we had a second highest recorded harvest in 2025. Over 15,000 birds were harvested. We have about 50,000 licenses issued, and we harvest turkeys in all 99 counties. Our turkey summer brood survey is the most important survey that we do to gauge the population changes over time. The harvests that we're seeing today are a direct result of good breeding populations from 2 years ago and good survival of those poults. We ask anybody that can participate in our July and August surveys to please report your turkeys that you see online through the DNR website. Ruffed grouse is also a species that falls underneath of my jurisdiction. Our ruffed grouse population is located in northeast Iowa in the driftless region, and we do not have a good understanding of how that population has changed over time. We do know that grouse need early successional habitat, and our timber is maturing. We ask our spring turkey hunters that hunt up in that area to please help us understand our grouse populations by responding to the surveys that we send out to them. If you have any additional comments, please make them tonight to the staff that are here. And of course, you can always reach me through the DNR website at wildlife@dnr.iowa.gov. I appreciate every phone call that I get with people that are interested in squirrels and wild turkeys. Have a good evening.
Good evening, trappers and hunters. We appreciate you guys showing up for these listening events. My name is Vince Evelsizer. I'm the Furbearer program biologist, and just want to share some things with you about furbearers. To start with here, just an overview of populations. A summary with that is that generally good news. Nearly all furbearer population levels in Iowa are stable or slightly increasing. The only exception to that is gray fox and muskrats. Also, this year with the fur market, it remains somewhat similar to last year. However, some species have actually ticked up a little bit this year in the fur market. Those species are the striped skunk, bobcats, mink, and muskrats a little bit. This next slide here looks at furbearer harvest. And just what we wanted to share with you is that since 1930, we've been tallying annual furbearer harvest from our fur buyers. And in the last few years, with coyotes and raccoon market value going down, both the DNR and trappers and predator hunters wondered if the actual harvest was different than what our fur buyers provide us. And the fur buyers provide us with really good numbers, and that's appreciated. But starting last year, as you may recall, we did a new survey in which we also surveyed our trappers and predator hunters to see what they reported for harvest and compare that to the fur buyer reports tally of harvest. And so on the lower right there, that table shows that indeed for both coyotes and raccoons, there is a discrepancy. So that first column is the fur buyer harvest tally for raccoons and coyotes. And then the second column there shows the harvest tally from this new survey. And you can see there that with coyotes especially, there was a large discrepancy. And so we'll start taking this into account with how we tally our annual fur harvest for those two species. With the other species of fur bearers, things like mink and muskrats, things like that, the tallies were very similar to each other. Next, wanted to just mention bobcats, that the bobcat population does continue to grow and expand in Iowa, and that we very much understand that they're doing well and spreading into more counties. Thought you might find it interesting that the average litter size in Iowa is 3 kittens. The average home range of a male bobcat is typically 22 square miles, whereas the home range on average for a female is generally 7 to 10 square miles. So a lot of what we know from bobcats came from research that was done between Iowa State and the Iowa DNR back in the early 2000s. Just wanted to give you an update on the gray fox pilot project. We're up to 3 collared gray foxes now. We've had 2 partners with this project, the Iowa Wildlife Federation and Iowa State University. And so this just shows a summary of the 3 gray foxes here, one in Lee County, the first male. And then the GF2 there was an adult female down in Davis County. She's kind of been our star collared fox in that she raised a litter of 6 pups this past summer without the help of a male. She lost her male mate late last winter. And so between having a tracking collar on her and also trail cam photos and videos, it really allowed us to get a peek into her life raising that litter. And then fortunately, she got a new collar put on her this fall by a private trapper that helped catch her again. So that's been a really neat story to learn from her. And then the third one there was GF3. which is actually one of her offspring that we were able to put a collar on her in October there. So tremendous feedback from the public with helping us on where gray foxes are, even help with trapping and that sort of thing. And we would also like to thank our own staff, both in law enforcement and wildlife, for their help. The 2 foxes down there in Davis County, we've had local staff that have been a great help with helping us keep track of those foxes. Next slide here, just wanted to give you an update on the trail cam survey that started up last winter in northeast Iowa, with the focus on finding whether or not there's gray fox or fishers in the northeast driftless region of Iowa. We knew those numbers would be low, but we just wanted to report that we had a successful field season and just carrying out that first year in running those cameras. So the blue plots on that map are kind of the tier 1 plots, and the yellow plots there were the tier 2 plots. So we focused on plots that had a 50% or greater woodland component habitat-wise for those 2 species. Anyway, at the end of the survey ran for approximately 6 weeks in the winter, mid-February to late March, and resulted in roughly 500,000 photos of all sorts of wildlife. And so it's been really interesting to compile those photos. We got a lot of good secondary information from fur such as bobcats and weasels, secretive species. So the point of doing this cam survey was to try to get more information on things like occupancy, where are they and where are they not, that our other surveys don't get at as well for things like those secretive species like fishers and gray fox. Wanted to touch on this too this evening with you all, is that there's been nice momentum in recent years in sort of reviving the beginner trapper program. And that can be beginners age 8 to beginners age 48 or age 78. It's been fairly well attended. We try to have 8 to 10 events a year. We're hoping to have 10 events this upcoming year. And would just like to thank the Iowa Trappers Association for their involvement. They've been a big help in getting these events going and running those events. So if you're interested in those sorts of events, you can check our website here coming up, or you can check with your local ITA rep in your region to find out when and where those are. And lastly, if you did want to find out more about fur populations and harvest and that sort of thing, just wanted you to know that for all the game species, there's an annual report that's done, fur included, and you can find that on our website there with that link. Thank you all.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Bogenschutz. I'm the Upland game biologist for the Iowa DNR, and I'm going to give you a quick recap of our past hunting seasons related to upland game. So I'm going to start with our populations and go a little bit with weather. It's our 100th year of pheasant hunting in Iowa, and it was a pretty good year for us. Last winter saw the 4th lowest snowfall totals that we've seen in 138 years of state records, and so on our roadside surveys, we saw adult hens were up 52%. And so excellent overwinter survival. So when we moved into nesting this spring, we had pretty good weather also during April and May, but as we moved into the summer kind of brood rearing season, June and July, we saw rainfall that was 82% above normal. And so on the roadside surveys, we actually saw that we had fewer chicks per hen than we had in 2024. But ultimately, it didn't matter because we had so many hens come through the winter that our roadside count ended up being the highest we'd had in 20 years. So you can kind of see the counts there last year statewide. Last year we had 19.7 pheasants per route statewide. This year, this past year, it increased to 28.1, which was a 43% increase. And so the best pheasant populations we've seen statewide since 2005 in almost 2 decades. So you can see our pheasant distribution map there. Obviously, things aren't equal across the state. The darker grays kind of show where we had our better pheasant numbers, and the northern half of the state generally had better pheasant numbers than the southern part of the state, but we generally saw increases statewide. I'm going to move to harvest now. So I can't share the 2025, this most recent year's harvest, because we haven't sent the survey out yet. So what I'm sharing here is the 2024 harvest, which was lower than 2023, but it was kind of expected because our roadside counts were down from 2023. If you look at the table there, in 2023 we harvested just shy of 600,000 pheasants, and then in last year in 2024 we harvested just under 500,000 birds. So kind of matched what we saw in the roadside count, so as expected. But looking ahead for this coming season, what do I expect? For our 100th year of pheasant hunting, I expect our harvest is going to be above where it was in 2023. I think we could harvest somewhere between 600 to maybe 750,000 roosters, which would put it at the highest harvest in the last 20 years. You can see a few of the reports we got in our Facebook post there. Generally, folks were pretty excited about how the season started this past fall. I'm going to jump a little bit to our harvest surveys where we come up with those numbers, and I touched on this a little bit last year. But basically, to estimate our harvest in the state for upland game, we send a letter after the season to a random sample of our hunters, which is great. We sell about almost 250,000 hunting licenses a year. The problem is only about a third of them small game hunt. So a lot of our surveys went to people who didn't hunt small game. So that makes the estimates a little bit more challenging to estimate. So with a 25 license season, many of you who bought your licenses through the app or online saw these questions about if you were a small game hunter. And so the purpose of this is just to help us dial in the survey better and get us more and better data. And so looking forward to that. I'll actually play with that data for the first time this coming year. I'm going to jump to the elephant in the room when it comes to our upland game populations like pheasants, and that's really habitat. The Conservation Reserve Program has become Iowa's predominant grassland habitat type. If you look at the little table here in our chart that going back to 1990, you can see hay and small grains. We had 4,000 square miles in the state of Iowa and about 3,000 square miles of CRP, and so CRP was kind of in the number 2 spot, but you can see here in 2024 that those roles have switched and that CRP is kind of the big driving number as far as our grassland habitat in the state. If you look at the chart there, the green line is our habitat acres and the brown line is our pheasant harvest, and you can see how our pheasant trend and our harvest matches pretty well with the habitat trend. So given CRP is important to us, Farm Bill is a big priority for us. They haven't reauthorized the Farm Bill yet, so we'd like to see that happen. Just last year alone, in 2025, we lost almost 110 square miles of CRP in the state. And I see that figure probably doubling or tripling next year and the year after if we don't have a change in the Farm Bill, basically looking at rental rates and kind of cost share for the program. I'll kind of wrap up on a positive note that our walk-in program is also funded through the Farm Bill, and we've actually received some good news on that. So we refer to it in Iowa as our Habitat and Access Program, IHAP for short, and we're expecting within maybe the next 30 days, USDA will make grants available to the states to continue that walk-in program. And in Iowa, we could be looking upwards of $3 million to maybe continue our walk-in hunting program. Many folks are familiar with the orange signs, which kind of dictate our walk-in program. It's mostly targeted at CRP, and so we need a strong CRP program. What we do with that program is provide incentives for landowners to make great habitat on their CRP. In exchange for that help, those landowners allow our hunters to hunt those areas, so that's just excellent. So one of the issues that came up last year during our public input meetings was, we've had better pheasant hunting now, and we've seen an increase in non-resident hunters, especially on our public land, and so a lot of feedback about hunter numbers, especially in northwest and north central regions. So with our new surveys with our upland game and harvest, we can kind of dive into that, and so what you see in that table there is we asked our hunters, what county did you pheasant hunt in most? And we asked that of residents and non-residents. And then what I did is I took our acres of public land by the regions, and you can see the regions that we divide the state up in there, and just divided the two. And so we can look at the number of non-resident hunters and how many acres of public land each hunter has. So you can see in northwest Iowa, we had about 23 acres of public land for every non-resident hunter. If you went to like region 3 there, which would be northeast, we had 15 acres of public land for each hunter. So, and then I could look at all hunters together as well. And so just looking at that, actually our highest hunter densities non-resident wise are actually in the northeast region of Iowa, which kind of rides along with the amount of public land. We don't have as much public land in that region, and also in the southeast region. But in the future, especially next year, with the new improved data we have on our small game survey, I hope we can dial those numbers in a little farther and kind of try to answer some of those questions that we receive from the public about our hunter numbers in public land. So if you have any questions about upland game, please direct your comments to the email on the screen there, and we'll try to follow up with them.
Good evening. I'm Orrin Jones, waterfowl biologist with the Wildlife Bureau. I have a short presentation to share with hunters on the population status of waterfowl, areas of concern, and the 2026 hunting seasons. Surveys conducted by federal wildlife agencies in the spring of 2025 found the fourth consecutive year of relatively similar duck populations that have declined from a peak in 2016. Many species are now below the long-term average. Mallards, in particular, have declined considerably from a peak in 2017, and at a population level are now 17% below the long-term average. Unfortunately, this trend has been particularly severe in breeding areas of significance to Iowa, including southern Saskatchewan, where the 25 counts of mallards were 37% below the long-term average. Southern Manitoba was down 15%. The eastern Dakotas were down 25%, and Minnesota was 28% below the long-term average. This trend is primarily driven by deteriorating habitat conditions on the breeding grounds due to drought and agriculture intensification. So it was no surprise that duck numbers here in Iowa, as counted during the Wildlife Bureau's fall migration survey, were below the recent average for 12 of 17 weeks during this past fall. There are several contributing factors, including the reduced duck populations I just mentioned, but also weather conditions that were less than ideal. Iowa experienced an abnormally wet summer, followed by a warm and dry fall. This left many of Iowa's wetlands in mediocre condition for fall migrating ducks. This was further exacerbated by a sudden outbreak of widespread snow and severe cold in late November and early December that resulted in a mass exodus of ducks during early December. Unfortunately, counts of Canada geese indicate that the goose migration was also below average for 12 of 17 weeks. Geese are facing many of the same threats as ducks, and a lackluster fall migration was likely the result of reduced populations and unfavorable weather conditions. Avian influenza continues to affect waterfowl across North America. Here in Iowa, outbreaks began in September and reached a peak in December. A wide array of species are affected, but Canada geese and trumpeter swans appear to be the most susceptible. Hunters may encounter sick birds or harvest birds that have the virus. Fortunately, the CDC considers the risk to humans to be low, but there are some simple common sense steps that can reduce exposure. First, avoid contact with sick birds or carcasses of birds that have died from unknown causes. Second, process your harvested birds in a well-ventilated area. Wear gloves, wash your hands, and clean contaminated surfaces. Dispose of carcasses in a responsible manner that limits exposure to scavengers or pets. And lastly, cook birds to a safe internal temperature. The 2026 hunting season dates will be very similar to 2025, with only minor adjustments due to the annual shift in the calendar. Daily bag limits will be the same as in 2025, and the two changes implemented in 2025 will remain in effect, and those were a 9-day teal season and a 3-bird daily bag limit for pintails. Thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions, please reach out.
Jace Elliott here, state deer biologist with the Iowa DNR. I'll be providing an update of deer harvest, population trends, and disease status over the past year. I'll also be discussing our proposed changes for the upcoming 2026 deer season. Across the state, hunters reported just under 102,000 deer harvests over the past season. This is up slightly from last season's total and down 3% from the 5-year statewide average. We continue to see a fairly stable statewide harvest trend over the last decade. However, summarizing this data at the statewide level can hide important differences in regional trends. Let's take a closer look at Iowa's deer harvest trends at the county scale. Now you're looking at a map that shows the percent change in this year's buck harvest compared to the 5-year average. Buck harvest is chosen because it is not biased by changes in antlerless quotas, but instead provides a more accurate reflection of harvest opportunities across time. As you can see, most counties in western, central, and southern Iowa show moderate to severe declines in buck harvest, which is reflective of both sustained population declines and past EHD activity across this region. We have been working to reverse this trend through regulations that limit doe harvest. On the other hand, we can see the opposite pattern across parts of eastern Iowa, including some counties that experienced the highest harvest rates in 2 decades. This next map shows the 5-year deer population trends across each management unit. As the harvest map suggests, deer numbers are declining throughout much of western, central, and southern Iowa. Other regions of the state are generally showing stable trends, with a fairly limited band of increasing deer numbers in eastern Iowa, specifically the Cedar Valley region. At the end of this presentation, I'll go over what regulatory changes are being proposed in light of these regional trends. Moving on to our deer disease segment, we continue to see chronic wasting disease increase its geographic range. This map shows which counties have detected CWD in wild deer, with 10 yellow counties having their first detection in 2025. Our department remains committed to documenting the spread of the disease while balancing quality hunting opportunities with deer herd health for as long as possible, while preparing Iowans for our future with CWD. Switching gears now to hemorrhagic disease, which includes both EHD and blue tongue viruses. 2025 was an exceptionally mild year for hemorrhagic disease in Iowa, as we received reports of less than 50 suspected mortalities statewide. This was a much-needed break for our western, central, and southern deer populations that are still very much in the shadow of back-to-back severe outbreaks in 2023 and 2024. As a reminder, we've developed a couple online tools to help better monitor hemorrhagic disease in Iowa, which can be found on our Iowa DNR app and deer hunting website. We encourage anyone that finds deer carcasses related to hemorrhagic disease to report this information using our new online public reporting tool. Doing so allows the Iowa Deer Program to better understand disease impacts and manage a balanced, quality deer population. Next, here are the proposed county antlerless changes for the upcoming 2026 season. Counties shaded in blue indicate a proposed increase in county antlerless quota, while counties shaded with red indicate a proposed decrease. As you can see, we're proposing to slightly increase county antlerless tags in several eastern counties due to expanding deer populations in this region. We're also proposing antlerless tag decreases in central and southern counties in response to recent population declines, largely resulting from prior hemorrhagic disease outbreaks. To the deer hunters in attendance, please use this opportunity to provide feedback on the proposed changes you see here. Finally, I want to highlight an important effort in the deer program, the Western Iowa Deer Initiative, which is a concerted effort to address the deer population decline throughout Western Iowa. This initiative kicked off in 2024 with 8 public meetings held throughout Western Iowa, attended by over 250 members of the public in total. A questionnaire revealed that a high proportion of attendees are unsatisfied with current deer numbers, support recent regulatory changes, such as reduced doe quotas, with nearly 90% supporting further doe harvest restrictions. We followed up with 3 additional public meetings the following year in Northwest Iowa, where deer declines have been ongoing the longest. These meetings averaged over 50 attendees per meeting. In this meeting series, we provided a proposal to create a new Western Iowa deer zone, which we will refer to as Zone B. These meetings were extremely helpful in guiding the direction and details of this new zone. Ultimately, attendees expressed 95% support for creating Zone B, which I will outline here in the next slide. But before doing so, I want to thank everyone that showed up to these meetings in strong numbers, as your participation helped shape the future of deer management in your region. Iowa's deer hunters should note that this regulatory change results in 2 resident general deer zones, which replaces the previously statewide general tag framework. Beginning in the upcoming 2026 deer season, all red counties will now be included in Zone B. These counties include Lyon, Sioux, O'Brien, Plymouth, Woodbury, Ida, Crawford, and Shelby County. In an attempt to achieve population recovery by further limiting doe harvest, Zone B general tags will be buck only going forward. Exceptions include youth and disabled tags, landowner tenant tags, and depredation tags. Zone B will also contain county-specific quotas of any sex tags for general hunters. The purpose of these quotas are to still offer some doe harvest opportunity for general residents, though at a much reduced level that encourages a population rebound. Additionally, these tags can be scaled each year based on future population trends. Note that these tags go on sale at 9 a.m. on August 15th and are limited to one per hunter on a first-come basis. While buck-only Zone B tags are valid across the whole zone, Zone B any sex tags are valid only in the county specified. Party hunting, also known as tag sharing, is now prohibited for both residents and non-residents in Zone B. This change was made after receiving strong support from local hunters and landowners in western Iowa who showed over 75% support for this change. Any county outside of the 8 counties in Zone B will be considered Zone A. Now, there is no change at all for Zone A hunters, except that Zone A general tags are not valid in Zone B. Notice that the yellow shaded counties in western Iowa still have a buck-only restriction during the first gun season, with Carroll and Audubon counties being added to the list in 2026. This final slide shows the new general tag options for resident deer hunters. As previously stated, the 91 counties in Zone A are still business as usual and offer any sex general tags for use within that zone. Zone B hunters will now have 2 options for general tags: the default buck-only license that is valid within the entire zone, or a limited quota of any sex tags that are restricted to a specific county. Residents can choose any combination of these general tags, with no more than 2 general tags allowed per hunter. This means that hunters may purchase a Zone A archery tag and a Zone B gun tag, just for example. For the most part, all previous rules still apply. No more than 1 general tag can be designated per season, regardless of zone, and hunters may participate in Gun 1 or Gun 2, but not both, regardless of zone. As a final reminder, general tags are only valid for the season and zone specified. Some of you may have further questions about these changes, which your meeting hosts can help answer this evening. Deer hunters within Zone B should keep an eye out for another series of public meetings this summer to discuss and spread awareness of these changes. Thank you all for taking time to participate and provide feedback this evening. Iowa's quality deer population is a direct result of our valuable relationship and cooperation with the public. Please feel free to reach out with any questions.